You know, it's so easy to picture the early church as this perfect golden age of faith. But today, we're pulling back the curtain on one of the most brilliant, chaotic, and just deeply human communities in the entire New Testament, the church in Corinth. And what we're going to see is how their very real, very messy problems led to some of the most profound teachings we have. I love that line because it points to a temptation we all have, idealizing the past. So many of us have this picture in our heads of the New Testament church as this pure, simple, perfect community. But the reality? Ugh, it was so much messier. This was a struggling church, and its biggest battles weren't with the world outside, but with itself. Okay, so here's our game plan for this deep dive. First, we're going to shatter that myth of a golden age. Then, we'll get to know the city of Corinth itself, the place where all this went down. After that, we'll untangle Paul's super complicated relationship with this church, diagnose the core philosophical problem at the root of all their issues, and finally, we'll look at the radical solution he proposed. All right, section 1, the not-so-golden age. Let's just go ahead and get this idea of a perfect early church right out of our heads. The reality was, well, way more complicated, and honestly, way more interesting. The story of Corinth is a powerful reminder of where the real danger to any community actually comes from. You know, it's funny, outside pressure, that usually makes a group stronger. It forges bonds. But what really tears a community apart? It's the stuff on the inside, that rot from within. And man, there is no clearer, more vivid example of this in the New Testament than the church in Corinth. Their internal issues were so severe they prompted two of the most extraordinary letters ever written. Okay, so to really get the problems, you've got to understand the place. So, welcome to Corinth. Let's dig into the unique cultural soil that allowed all these specific issues to take root and just grow wild. So this kind of gives us this city's profile. And what's wild is how every single one of these points ties directly to a specific problem in the church. First, Corinth was a boomtown, full of self-made men, which just bred this incredible snobbery. Second, its reputation was so bad. I mean, the phrase to Corinthianize literally meant to live promiscuously. Third, it had this very Roman sue-everybody legal culture. And finally, hanging over it all was Greek philosophy, with its very particular and very problematic view of the human body. All right, next up, we have to unpack the timeline. Paul's relationship with this church was, wow, it was messy, it was painful, it was just full of conflict. Understanding the sequence of his visits and his letters is the key to unlocking why the two letters we have, 1st and 2nd Corinthians, feel so incredibly different from each other. Okay, so when you look at this timeline, the big thing to get is this. The letters we call 1st and 2nd Corinthians, they're actually the 2nd and the 4th letters in this long, drawn-out drama. It's just crazy to think that two of Paul's letters to this church are completely lost to history. So he founds the church, sends a quick letter that apparently doesn't work, then writes what we call 1st Corinthians. He follows that with a disastrous, painful visit, sends another fiery, severe letter that we don't even have, and only then, after all that, does he write 2nd Corinthians. And that timeline explains the huge shift in tone between the two letters we do have. See, 1st Corinthians is all about their problems. Paul is addressing all the chaos going on inside their community. But 2nd Corinthians? That's all about Paul's problems. It's deeply personal, and he's defending himself against their insults. It really boils down to this. The first letter is Paul saying, here's what's wrong with you, and the second is him saying, here's what you all think is wrong with me. Okay, so we've seen the symptoms, right? The division, the immorality, all that stuff. Now it's time to get to the actual diagnosis. This section, the body problem, is where we drill down to the root cause, because almost every single issue in Corinth can be traced back to one single fundamental misunderstanding about what it even means to be human. Okay, this slide right here, this is the absolute heart of the whole thing. See, the Greek way of thinking, which was everywhere in their culture, was that your body is basically a temporary prison for your soul. The goal is for the soul to escape this physical shell. But the Hebrew worldview, which is the foundation of Christian thought, sees a person as this integrated whole. It's not about an immortal soul, it's about the resurrection of the body. And trust me, that one difference, it changes everything. And this big philosophical mistake led to 3 really dangerous attitudes. First, if the body doesn't really matter, hey, why not just indulge it? That explains all the sexual immorality. Or you could swing the other way and just ignore it completely, practicing this harsh self-denial, where even marriage is seen as unspiritual. And a third option was to idolize the body, which was all over Greek art and sports. All 3 of these were running rampant in Corinth. And then Paul comes in with this just breathtaking counter-argument. Notice he doesn't say your soul is the temple. Nope. He says your body is. He's arguing that what you do with your physical body, eating, drinking, your sexuality, all of it is a deeply spiritual act. The physical isn't separate from the spiritual, it's the very arena where our spiritual lives happen. This was completely revolutionary for their world, a total mind-blower. So if that whole messed up view of the body was the disease, then what's the cure? And that brings us to our last section, the agape solution. Paul's answer wasn't some new list of rules. It was a whole new way of relating to people, based on a kind of love they had pretty much never even heard of. So the Greeks had a few different words for love. You've got eros, which is that romantic, mutual attraction, and there's Philadelphia, which is like brotherly love, the affection you feel for like-minded friends. But Paul reaches for a third word, one that was barely even used back then, agape. And this is the game changer. Agape isn't a feeling, it's an action. It's not based on what you get, but on what you decide to give. It is a sacrificial act of the will. And that's what makes agape so completely radical. Think about it. You can't order someone to feel attraction for somebody else. You can't force people to like each other, but you can tell them to love with agape because it's a choice. It's a decision to give your attention and your care to someone else, whether or not you find them attractive, whether or not you even like them, or whether or not they thank you for it. It's the kind of love God has for us. So check out this number, 0. What in the world does that represent? It's the number of spiritual gifts the Corinthian church was lacking. That's right. According to Paul, they had none missing. Prophecy, tongues, wisdom, miracles, you name it, they had it. They were an incredibly gifted community. And this is the punchline to the whole thing. Their problem wasn't a lack of gifts. It was a lack of the love you need to handle those gifts properly. You can be unbelievably charismatic and deeply carnal at the exact same time. Without agape, spiritual gifts don't unite a community. They become dangerous weapons for pride and for division. True spiritual maturity isn't about how impressive your abilities are, it's about your capacity to love. And that leaves us with a huge question that is just as relevant for us today as it was in ancient Corinth. Think about our own lives, at work, in our communities, even in our families. When we see amazing talent and incredible ability, but it's totally disconnected from that foundational sacrificial care for other people, is that a feature we should be celebrating, or is it a fundamental bug in the system? The Corinthian story suggests it's the one thing that can bring everything else crashing down.